Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So, the Until Dawn movie came out, and, well, it was better than I expected it to be, but it's still not great. Listen, as a longtime fan of the game, and with Until Dawn holding a special place within my heart since it was one of the first games that really pulled me into the world and stories that video games have to offer, I have a lot of thoughts about this film. When they first announced that the film's premise was going to be very different from the game, I was really upset that we were going to be missing out on our beloved characters. We were being told there's going to be this brand new story, brand new characters, and that we should think of this film as taking place within the world of Until Dawn, rather than being an adaptation of the game's story and events. To which I say, why title the film Until Dawn then? But we all know it's just for the quick cash grab anyway. So besides that point, I slowly over time accepted the fact that this is not going to be remotely similar to the video game story, and yet I still kinda had a tiny bit of hope that since we have the character of Dr. Hill and since we have the Wendigos, that maybe they would tie those in really nicely to line up with the events and story of the game, especially the lore behind the Wendigos. However, they kind of butchered that. That being said though, the film itself does have some actually really good moments. It was a more enjoyable experience than I thought it would be going into it. So let's break down the Until Dawn movie together. Before we jump in though, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, follow me over on Twitch, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your car keys, lock those doors, and let's sprint into it. Before I draw all of my comparisons to the beloved game, I want to first talk about the movie as if the game never existed, because as a standalone horror movie, I don't think this is the worst one out there. The first half of this film is surprisingly strong. It starts off immediately in the car with these 5 friends, Megan, Nina, Abe, Max, and our main character, Clover. They are on this road trip together retracing Melanie's final footsteps, who is Clover's missing older sister. As they come across the final spot, the final place that they have evidence that Melanie was at, they arrive at this gas station where the attendant says some interesting words before sending them up the mountain, where they stumble across a crazy house that appears to be stuck in a realm of its own as the rain seems to trap them in there. But as they enter inside and find not only these missing people's posters, but Melanie's signature in the guest book, the night of horror suddenly begins as the hourglass on the wall suddenly flips over. Now, the basic premise of this film is that the friends have 13 nights, 13 attempts to try and escape the horrors of these different creatures that keep coming to kill them, and they have to survive, say it with me now, until dawn. The first night, we have a masked murderer going around finding each one of them before he kills them. The second night is a combination of some really cool supernatural things, with Megan, the somewhat psychic friend of the group, getting possessed and speaking in the voices of the missing people before they get tossed around by this magical force, resulting in Clover getting dragged off into a witch's cabin. Once inside, Clover does end up getting possessed by this witch, before we see a room that's full of creepy dolls and even one that's a clown doll, but eventually after some chaos, all 5 of them end up dead once more. Now, in this witch's cabin, before she sort of possesses Clover here, she does actually say some valuable information to her. She says that you can either survive the night or become a part of it. So on that third night, as the group barricades themselves in the bathroom, trying to avoid any and all danger together, it's at this point in the story that you start to see their previous deaths seemingly leave traces on them every single time they respawn. Megan's losing some hair, Max has a bruise where he previously got stabbed in the eye, and so on and so forth. So as they discuss the information from this witch, as well as what they can possibly do in order to survive and escape, out of freaking nowhere, they just start combusting. And I mean truly spontaneously combusting into guts and powder and juices and everything. And it's all because they drank the tap water, it was just kind of a comedic moment. It was shocking the first time, but then as they kept going, it kind of got a bit funny. Although Megan did have a very gruesome death here, it was kind of torturous in a lot of ways for her. But as they all freak out and they all slowly explode, Clover is the last one to die here, and as she lays on the ground, Dr. Hill, aka that creepy gas station guy, appears in the house, stands over her, and says, "You don't survive by sitting still," before she then dies. Now, these first 3 nights are probably the best the movie gets. It's really strong and intriguing. We get a little bit of a start to the character developments in these scenes with Abe and Nina trying to run away on the second night. I thought that was nicely done. And while there's definitely quite a few jump scares, I thought they were done pretty tastefully during these scenes. And the fact that you had a couple different enemy types here kept us as the audience on our toes, because we didn't know what trope or what genre they might try and lean into next during the next night that they spawn in. So if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I was really enjoying the film up to this point. But as we get to the 4th night, things slowly start to take a turn for the worse here. As they wake up on this 4th night, they try to explore the house and gather all of the information they can that might help them find a way out of here. Also, so that they're not just sitting around and can avoid getting exploded once again. So as they explore this area, they go on to find some information about a village called Glore Valley that had been buried due to a mining accident causing the deaths of over 1,000 people. They then almost immediately realize that they are currently within that buried town. The tunnels are the buildings and the roadways that are connected and buried under here for all these years. But in addition to this, they also go on to find a tape recorded by Dr. Hill that studies the strange effect or curse this town has experienced, and anyone entering the town will also go on to experience. People become engrossed by their fears and anxieties, and this causes them to transform into something called a Wendigo. I know you all are probably gritting your teeth right now, but just bear with me until we get through this summary. So essentially, all of these signs that we saw of their previous deaths, it's actually them beginning to transform into a Wendigo. It's the start of that transition. The reason they only have 13 nights is because that's how long it takes until they are fully transformed into a Wendigo. But before they can even begin to process this information, Clover decides to try and talk to Hill through this radio, where he reveals that if one person is sent forward to die, the rest of them can live and be released. But, of course, not wanting to split up the group and obviously not wanting to sacrifice one of their friends, they try to discuss a plan of action, but it's then that Clover, wanting to try and get some more information out of Dr. Hill, offers to meet up with him just for a little chat, and he agrees. Her friends are obviously very concerned that she's walking right into a trap, but both Clover and Abe, Nina's boyfriend, think that it's a good way to get information out of him, because worst case scenario, she just dies and they can all then kill themselves as well, and it will go to the next night and next attempt. But as Clover rushes to the front door, the friends are all arguing with her, trying to stop her, except for, of course, Abe, who's saying that she should go. But out of nowhere, Nina just ends up killing her boyfriend for simply agreeing with Clover when Nina herself doesn't agree with Clover. This was honestly such a weird and crazy turn of events that never results in anything, which is really disappointing. Like, I don't know about all of you guys, I feel like if my boyfriend killed me and then I had to work with him, I would want to talk to him about it. I'd want to hash it out. I'd want to argue. I'd want to yell, I wouldn't just be okay with that and wake up and be like, oh, we're back to lovey-dovey. No, bitch, you killed me. Like, I don't understand how this didn't result in any sort of drama or development for these characters. But either way, whatever. Nina kills her boyfriend, and then Nina dies because Masked Killer comes to kill them again. And Megan ends up dying at the hands of a Wendigo while her and Max are trying to catch up to Clover. But then Max does end up finding Clover and getting there just in time because she did end up walking into a trap, which happened to be Melanie, her sister, by the way, but Melanie's kind of not there. Melanie is kind of a Wendigo, in case you didn't catch the drift by now.
Oh no! There's Melanie. That's a shame, she was really nice.
So then the two of them do have a bit of a romantic conversation. They are exes, there is that slight dynamic going on, but this scene does result in Max ending up killing Clover so that they could start over. Except Max, unlike using the knife that he just used to, peacefully kill Clover, decides to go out with a literal bang here in probably what is the most comedic and stupidest death in this entire film, where he just takes a sip of the dripping water from the rooftop here, runs out of the hiding spot, faces Melanie, just shouts a simple hey, and then just explodes because, you know, the explosive water that he took a sip of 2 seconds ago. Like, all right, film, okay, sure. But anyway, after this stupid death, we actually get probably the best jump scare in the film, at least based on the audience's reaction here, because it did get every single person in the theater, including myself, because it happens at a time where you're sort of relaxing and you're thinking you're going to get a lot of background information because you're seeing Clover relive the events the night that her sister left. And you see this tense moment as they're arguing before she chases after her, and then bam, right in the freaking doorway, it gets you. But anyway, as Clover wakes up again on what is supposed to be night 5, it turns out that this is not night 5 at all, but night 13 based on their signatures in the notebook, and they just can't remember the previous nights. This is where it starts to get really bad because this jump was very jarring to experience. We just had all 4 of these nights playing out pretty slowly, and they were interesting, they were intriguing, they built tension, we started to get a little bit of character development and conflict. And then all of a sudden we just jumped to the grand finale, the final night, their last chance to escape. It was definitely weird, and it does not work whether you've played the game or not. It's definitely a major issue with the pacing. So as the friends are struggling with their lost memories, they soon realize that they are missing Megan. They're not just forgetting the nights, they almost forgot one of their friends. Then out of nowhere, Abe suddenly remembers that he's been recording stuff, and so they look back through the phone and watch this sort of montage of jump scares as they see what they encountered and what caused them to die these past few nights that we've missed. Yet at the final video, they see that Megan ended up following Dr. Hill down this mysterious tunnel, and in hopes to try and get there before she is killed, the 4 of them go into the tunnel after her in their desperate attempt and final attempt to survive until dawn. The 4 friends run through this buried town, somehow finding the way and dodging all of these mutated Wendigos and all of the other horrors that are within this messed up, possessed and cursed town here, before Clover is then separated from her friends as the masked killer suddenly drops down between them. As Clover goes forward looking for Megan, she ends up encountering her mutated Wendigo sister, and this time she finally kills her and puts her out of her misery. I feel like this scene was supposed to be a lot more impactful, but because they didn't take the time to really focus in on the characters, this scene definitely fell short. And it's a bit disappointing because Clover is the main character. Her grief and her depression and her not dealing with the fact that her sister is missing is why they're on this road trip to begin with. So it's kind of sad that the monologue here didn't really conclude any of her feelings or show any sort of growth or character arcs, but whatever. Either way, she moves forward, she finds Megan locked up, and as she goes to find the key to unlock Megan and free her from this Wendigo that's about to attack her, she ends up running into Dr. Hill, and they have this lengthy confrontational moment. Dr. Hill goes on to reveal that this town is morphing to her ideas, to Clover's fears and foundations, because of all the trauma, anxiety, and depression that she has. Dr. Hill's motives here don't really come across though. I can't quite tell if he's just fascinated by this occurrence happening in this town and the curse, but either way, he goes on this very lengthy monologue, and as he turns his back, Clover ends up taking his coffee cup because for some reason he has a freshly brewed cup of coffee despite the water being poisoned, and it's just a bit weird and a weak ending, but she takes the coffee cup, adds some of that poison combustible water that's dripping from the ceiling into his mug without him noticing, before he turns around, takes a sip, and sure enough, he is killed, allowing all of them to escape the night because the night has gotten its sacrifice. So the 5 of them all rush to escape the underground horrors that this place holds within it, and as the sands of time are running out, you see this mad dash with Wendigo chasing all 5 of them, before just in the nick of time, they crawl out of the pits of hell, and they survive until dawn. And that's it, that's the movie. They literally just drive off and that's the end. As a standalone horror film, it's still severely lacking in relation to these characters. We don't get any real growth. I don't really understand if Clover grew or healed by this experience at the end. Again, that sort of monologue that she has with her sister felt like it fell short, and these dynamics between these friends just felt severely lacking. I wish we got some more conflict. I wish we got some more drama. Again, going back to the scene with Nina killing her boyfriend. How does that not affect the rest of the nights that follow? That takes place on night 4. They still have 9 more nights to get through, and you're telling me they didn't once argue about it? And then for Max and Clover, them being exes, they don't really play into the drama behind that either, so these characters were just in need of so much work. The big jump in the middle of the film with the pacing issues there is also really bad, no matter if you've played the game or not. It just felt very jarring, and it felt like we went from the beginning to the end and they cut out the entire middle. It would have been really cool to see not only a few more nights of death to showcase not only different enemy types that could create unique scares, but to also show the group learning and adapting and trying to figure out different strategies to get out of here, like the phone. Maybe there's a scene with them figuring out that, hey, these recordings save while nothing else does. Writing in notebooks perhaps doesn't save and carry over into the next night when they spawn in, but on the phone it does. Little details like that to make this feel just a lot more of a full and complete story, rather than just the start and ending. But all of that being said, the film is still quite enjoyable, especially within that first half. I, as a fan of the games, was actually still enjoying it despite all of the differences in the premise and the comparisons that we are going to talk about here, because the scares were just so good. The tension was great, and again, they started introducing the characters, but they didn't take the time to really finish out the rest of the story, which, in my opinion, is definitely a shame. But now we have to talk about these comparisons, because as a video game adaptation, this is quite bad. They do this weird thing where they not only change the lore of the Wendigos, but then they also kind of set this up as both a prequel and a sequel to Until Dawn. The fact that Dr. Hill is in this story and the fact that he dies at the end immediately makes me think that this is a sequel and that Until Dawn came first. Not to mention, we also have a badge of Dr. Hill from Blackwood Sanatorium, as well as Joshua's trauma file. So it makes me think that Until Dawn has already happened. But then, at the very end of the movie, on the monitor screen that Dr. Hill had in his office, we see one of the screens turn to a snowy cabin, which then seems to imply that Until Dawn is going to occur after this, so that this movie is a prequel. So if I'm being honest, I'm a bit confused as to which one it's trying to be here. If it's a prequel or a sequel, I can't really tell. But either way, it doesn't really work because the lore behind the Wendigos is so drastically different. Now we have to talk about this because I was really upset that they changed the lore of the Wendigos this much. I expected a little bit of a change. I was kind of under the assumption that the Wendigo would be the final enemy here, and the Wendigo are sort of scaring the prey before eventually killing them. That was my first impression, that was my thought. Obviously, that is wrong, but the fact that the Wendigo are just sort of a manifestation of what fear and anxiety causes people to become, it makes no sense to me. I'm not quite sure how they got that from the original lore of Wendigos here. It's always kind of been about cannibalism. So I'm definitely a bit lost in relation to all of this. And I'm also disappointed that we don't get any don't move sections. We don't see them standing still knowing that the Wendigo can't see them if they just stand still. And we don't even get a flamethrower section. We don't see them actually fighting back against these Wendigo. I just feel like they could have done so much more to still connect it to the world and lore of Until Dawn, because right now, it's not connected in relation to this overarching world. It definitely feels like some sort of parallel universe where the rules are different. So all of this just frustrates me even more that they went on to name this movie Until Dawn when it's just entirely different. The only through line is Dr. Hill, and even he is so confusing because in the games, he's not real. He's a manifestation of Josh's psyche. Josh is imagining his old therapist as this sort of mutated mentor that is guiding him through this night of horrible actions. So in terms of the overarching plots, I'm just not seeing these connections here. The only time in the entire film that it truly felt a little bit similar to the game was probably those first 3 nights with them leaning into the different styles and genres of horror, because that was a core element to the game. They wanted to lean into the cheesy and tropey elements within horror before they then change it all up and do the twist towards the ending. But with the movie falling short after those 3 nights, that whiff of similarity in the tone and energy immediately disappears. In my opinion, I do think that if they leaned into the characters' personalities, if they had them bickering a lot more, if they had a lot more of these arguments that were sort of petty and pointless that we saw in the game, then the energy and tone could have once again been a bit more similar to the energy and feeling the game creates, but they just didn't do any of that. The other aspect to Until Dawn that they kind of destroyed with this film was actually the butterfly effect. In the game, when you make a decision, it might not be until a few chapters later that that decision has an actual impact on your story. But in this film, we never see their decisions truly have an impact here. The night keeps constantly changing. It's not the same night over and over again, and they have to learn what the right decision is, because that's another area that it could have been a bit more similar. If they were looking at those videos on the phone, seeing, okay, last time we turned left and we died, how about this time we go right? If it was more of like a learning process, showing them the right way to get out of there, then I think that would be a lot more similar to the style and structure of the game. But again, they didn't do that because every single night is different, the enemies aren't in the same spots, it's not the same enemies, so it's definitely a bit of an issue all around in terms of an adaptation. But while the film definitely falls short as an adaptation in relation to all the things I just talked about, I will admit there was some moments, quite often actually, that I got memories and almost flashbacks to the video game. I wouldn't necessarily call all of these things Easter eggs, but if you have a keen eye and if you've played the game multiple times, you will definitely see where they're drawing the inspiration from for some of these scenes. Right at the start of the movie, we see that Megan is wearing a butterfly necklace, which is a nice little ode to the butterfly effect. Later on, when Megan and Max are running in the woods, we have a scene where she ends up tripping and falling onto a sheet of glass, and we get the exact same camera angle from underneath that we got with Emily when she falls on the window as the tower is collapsing, and I thought that was a nice way to sort of tie things together. Also, as Megan falls through the glass and is dragged off by the Wendigo into the tunnels, I couldn't help but think of Jess getting dragged off into the mine shaft, because they do the same thing with the door slamming shut behind them. Another visual image that I got was when Max helps Clover hobble away from her Wendigo sister. They end up in this mine shaft and they're sitting there hiding, and I just couldn't help but remember Matt and Jess running for their lives and then having to hide at the very end of the game. Similarly, right before that, Clover has a bear trap stuck on her ankle, and seeing Max pry the thing open, I just couldn't help but remember Mike and his poor fingers that he lost in so many people's playthrough. We go on to have a scene where the group is trying to call for help on this radio that looks identical to the radio that Matt and Emily call for help on. You also have the masked murderer looking exactly like Josh, minus the cool wig and hair. You have this control room that Dr. Hill is in that's, again, identical to the control room we see in this vision here. They took that insane asylum chair, and that is what Megan is locked down in at the end for that grand finale. And then last but not least, my favorite Easter egg in probably the entire film here has to be Abe's first death here. Because of the fact that he's sliced in half, and they do almost the same exact camera angles that you see when Josh gets sliced in half by the saw blade, where you see like the legs fall over and then all the guts are hanging out because his torso is still pinned on the wall. I thought that was a really nice little ode to the game. I'm sure there's more of these little visual images and ties and Easter eggs to the game that I probably missed, but I only saw the film once because it's still in theaters and I don't feel like paying more money to see it a second time, so let me know if you saw any more that I might have missed. While these little visual images and connections to the game were really cool to see, I would have much rather had a connection and tie-in through the lore, rather than through these snippets of similarities. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the Until Dawn movie is actually a surprisingly decent horror movie on its own, but it sadly is a pretty terrible adaptation of the beloved video game. So with that, everyone, if you made it this far into the video, let me know by leaving some sort of a horror movie trope emoji down below, whether that be a clown, a moon, a wolf. Just pick something scary and leave it down there. Also, if you guys like my discussion, make sure you guys hit that like button down below and tell me all of your thoughts and feelings. Did you see the movie? Did you like it? Did I miss any little Easter eggs or details they pulled from the game? Let me know down below. While you guys are down there, make sure you click subscribe to see more videos from me and turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys!